For the benefit of any members of the public that are attending, my name is Alan Cowan. I'm currently the chair of the IGB. I'm also an NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde board member. Welcome to this meeting of Inverclyde IGB. This meeting has been held remotely and will be filmed and recorded for live and subsequent broadcast available through the council website. The meeting will be broadcast and recorded to fulfil our public task obligation to enable members of the public to observe the democratic process. The IGB is a joint data controller with Inverclyde Council and NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde Health Board under the General Data Protection Regulations and the Data Protection Act. Data collected during this remote meeting will be retained in accordance with the published policies available through the council website. Members of the IGB are reminded that they should follow the IGB's established meeting protocol, including around the use of the chat facility, and that comments made there are visible to all participants in the meeting, which may include members of the public who have also received invitations to this meeting. So with that done, let me just remind you of the purpose of the meeting today, which is twofold. One is to receive and approve our annual accounts and authorise the Chief Officer, the Chair and the Chief Financial Officer to sign those accounts. And the second item is to receive a report and approve further resources around cost of living responses. So those are the two papers on this special meeting today. Let me thank, as ever, officers for preparing the papers, and also thank members of Audit Scotland who I assume might be on the call. I haven't actually seen that, but I'm assuming they'll be there somewhere, for preparing papers and also for being available to answer questions. It's hopefully a short meeting today. We've had, I know, a pre-meeting with Audit Scotland. The Audit Committee met at 1 and had a pre-scrutiny session around the audit itself, around the external audit itself. So I'm hoping that gives members some assurance. I'm hoping that we can conduct our business within the hour today for both items. So with that in mind, I'm not planning to have a comfort break. Clearly, if we go beyond that, I'd be happy to respond to members if that's what they need. I just remind members of the normal meeting protocol. Mute the mic, of course, unless you're speaking. My preference always is to take questions and comments through the chat facility, queue for questions, see for comment. I will accept hands up. It's very difficult for me to see all the hands on the screen because there are more people than is on my single screen. So I will need assistance from the legal officer and others if there are people with hands up. So I would prefer to put a mark in the chat, but I'll leave it to you if you feel that's the way want to use the other way. And of course, if in principle, if you just address your remarks in principle through the chair rather to each other so we can maintain a level of order. Thank you for that. I would just remind members of the public that you're welcome to attend this meeting. You attend as observers, and we're delighted if you're online to see you. I would also remind you that we don't take members of the public's questions at this forum. There are other means and mechanisms to contribute to the works of the HSCP or the IGB, but we will just look to you as observers today, and will not be taking questions or comments in the chat function. With that in mind, I'm just going to remind, hopefully you've read all the papers, assume you've seen those. I'll do the usual thing, which is ask the sponsor of the paper simply to introduce that paper and point to the recommendations to summarise it before I move to members' questions. So with that done, please let me move to item 1, which is apologies and substitutions first. I have apologies from David Gould and also from Councillor Lynn Quinn. I'm just going to pause for a second to establish if there are any other apologies. So 2 apologies, David Gould and Councillor Lynn Quinn. Any other apologies that we know? I'm not seeing anything going on there. That's fine. So we'll note those as apologies. Item 1 then, declaration of interest. This is simply to ask members to declare any interest in any items on the agenda today where a member of the public might reasonably judge that a conflict might exist. So this is the opportunity for members to declare any interest on any items on the agenda. Pause. It would seem that members are content. Thank you for that. So let's move then quickly to item 2, which is the main item on the agenda today. I'm going to start by asking Craig Given just to introduce the item. I'm fairly confident Craig will then hand off to Audit Scotland. The normal style is that they would summarise and quickly walk through in broad terms the content of the audit. Once we get to that point, I would then invite Councillor Robertson, pardon me, as the chair of our audit committee, who have met with Audit Scotland, had the chance to scrutinise the report on behalf of the board at 1 o'clock today. So I would just ask Liz to say a few words at that point. With that all done, I'll then obviously open the issue to questions from the board. So let's start first with Craig. Craig.
Thank you, Alan. For those who were at the previous meeting, I apologise. There's going to be a lot of similarities to what's said here. So I just wanted, first of all, to thank, the auditors for all the work and the partnership we've had over the last number of years. I think it's been very, very productive, and very pleased to be having these accounts that we have. I'd also like to extend a very big thank you to my team, and especially Marie, who heads up that team, and the amount of excellent work that has been done to get us to this position. In my opinion, this is a clean audit report, and the auditors will confirm that as well. And I think that's what every CFO strives for. There is a number of recommendations which I know Mark was going to go through briefly as well, but I just wanted to draw and highlight a few of the recommendations that came out of the report and what we're actively doing at the moment. The recommendation is for us to have a more medium to long-term plan in the next number of months, and it is my intention to be working and looking at a new 5-year financial plan to help alleviate that. Also, one of the recommendations is to have savings proposals. As most people will be aware, we're well underway in terms of been doing that, and we've now got our budget group set up, and we're well under the way in developing savings to meet that criteria and look at our funding pressures going forward. The integration schemes, there was another recommendation from prior years, and this is something that's ongoing at the moment, and we're working very closely with our partners in Greater Glasgow and Clyde about bringing that to a conclusion. And finally, implementation of locality planning groups. This is where, again, we're in the process of developing these and bringing that will be brought forward in the next few months. So they were all the main points I wanted to make before we hand over to the auditors. Thank you.
So thanks, Craig. I think you said that Mark was going to speak to this. I'll just pause there to see whether it's Mark, Grace, or anybody else. I think it might be Mark. Yeah, okay, Mark, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Again, apologies to anyone who was at the prior meeting. This will be a bit repetitive, but yes, good afternoon, everyone. And as Craig said, this is our annual audit report for the 21-22 audit. And again, this will be our final report as auditors of the IGB. So again, to place on record just our thanks to members and officers for all their assistance and cooperation over the past 6 years. So the first thing, just to draw members' attention then to the key messages in the report, which I'm glad to say show a clean audit opinion. And at paragraph 26, we confirm that we've no significant findings to report in respect to the financial statements either. Some of the other key messages there, an underspend of 13 million was returned. This was mainly due to additional late funding received in relation to COVID, among other things, as well as some ongoing vacancies in services. As Craig said, in relation to financial planning, there is a medium-term plan in place, but a longer-term plan is yet to be fully developed. And you'll see that that's in the recommendations in Appendix 1 again, as Craig has already said. Satisfied with the responses to our recommendations, that includes those brought forward. In relation to governance and performance, we report a positive story with effective arrangements in place. And again, this year, we report, as Craig said, again, the delay to the integration scheme, but we know that this isn't really within the board's gift. And that management are working alongside the other Glasgow IGBs to move this forward. So I won't say two more, but happy to take any questions.
Craig, thank you. That's the shortest summary we've had in a while, but thank you. It reflects the good nature of the report, I think. Board members, let me just pause and allow Councillor Robertson just to now reflect on the pre-scrutiny that the Audit Committee had, and if there's anything to add or anything of substance there. So I'm going to move to Liz Robertson.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I'll talk now about our discussions of an audit report that I'm now more familiar with in my own family tree, because we've looked at it 3 times already today. So we, as an audit committee, expressed our thanks to the internal team and the external team who've worked on this. We've acknowledged that it is a really good audit report for us to have at this particular point. We also said our farewells to Audit Scotland as our external auditors, and said to them that we will miss them when they go and they're no longer with us, and thank them for all the things that they've done over the past few years. In terms of the substance of the report, the main issues that we asked questions about and commented on were about the longer term financial planning side of things. It's difficult to do long term planning when we don't know what the financial settlements are going to be and what the resources that are going to be available in order to do that. So we discussed that. We also expressed a disappointment, echoing the report in terms of locality planning, but looked at the work that has already started in terms of understanding what's happened in the Ayrshires, and actually looking at bringing some learning from those other authorities into Inverclyde and building on those types of things. So we're not content with where we are in terms of locality planning, but neither are we not addressing it and not doing things to try and make things better. I also expressed, and it's a particular issue that I feel is really important, is that the locality planning that we look at through our community planning partnership, through Inverclyde Alliance, has been somewhat separated from locality planning through the IGB and the HSCP. And my hope for the future would be that that would become more synergised and closer together again. I will mention the final thing that became a source of conversation, but I'm assuming that other members will want to bring this up in this forum, in the full IGB forum, but I will bring it up because it was something that we discussed in our audit committee setting, which was the issue of late funding. When funding's coming late to IGBs, then one, is that okay in terms of our statement of accounts? Is it overstated in our accounts? Is it an issue of best value that we have to look at? When money's coming late, do we get best value of potentially spending it? And also, when late funding comes and then maybe has to go back at a later date, then what does that do for the relationships between the IGB and sources of funding? So that's a kind of summary of discussion. I know that other members may want to come in terms of more detailed comment on that. And the only other thing I wanted to say was Councillor Quinn can't be here today. She's given her apologies, but she wanted to express that in terms of her role in the audit committee, that she was happy with the report going forward also. So to honour Lynn's comment, I'll include that as my final statement. Thank you very much.
Councillor Robertson, thank you. Thank you to all three contributors there for bringing us a little bit of a colour and shape to the report and the scrutiny. Let's open it to questions then. I think we've got a fairly good understanding of the report. We'll have read it anyway. So questions or comments from board members at this stage. I'm open to either indication in the chat, or if you need to put your hand up. I'm not seeing any. I'm happy to pad here for a little.
Diana McCrone has her hand up.
Thank you very much. Diana, please go ahead.
Hi, yes, I would like to echo Councillor Robertson's concerns there, and I'm wondering how we can make long-term financial plans when we only get the budgets just before the year starts on a yearly basis, when the government gives us money at the last minute and then takes it back because you don't spend it fast enough, and how you could produce a 5-year plan on the back of that. I really don't know. It makes it very difficult.
Thanks, Diana. I'm going to go to Kate, who's got a marker down. I'll come back and maybe invite Craig to comment. But go to Kate first. Kate.
Apologies, I'm on mute. It was just a comment around myself coming in as the incoming chief officer to say that the level of the outcome of this audit is so positive that it's something that we can build on, and it gives us a level of assurance from my point of view about some of the plans that we've got and the ability to deliver them despite some of the longer term plans. I think when you kind of look at the long term, what is the long term at this moment in time, bearing in mind the uncertainty around IGBs and where the National Care Service is. So I think we should be doing ourselves a bit more of recognising the positives as opposed to seeing that as a challenge, because we will do the planning that reflects the money that we have at this moment in time. So it was just to thank Craig and his team, particularly Marie and the other management accountants, for delivering in such a good report. But I just thought I would mention that from myself.
Thanks, Kate. I'm going to go back to Craig. So this issue of late funding is clearly something that I think that all the board have been conscious of in the last few weeks. I remind me that I did, on behalf of the board, drop a short note, I think quite clear and concise, which kind of drew this out and into focus. It went to the chair of the IJB's network, who himself has regular meetings with government. So it was as a means to get both our circumstances recognised and highlighted. But I think in the context of the wider IJB network, I don't think it's unique to us. It's really happening across the IJB network. I'm going to see if there's a comment Craig wants to make about the problem of late funding and being able to profile that for sensible spend in year. And of course, as has happened, often having to hand it back. So let's just ask Chief Financial Officer any issues around late funding that he wants to add to the discussion. And then I'll go to Christine and then Robert.
Okay. No, thank you, Chair, for that. To answer Diane's question, the straightforward answer is doing the best that I possibly can with the information that I have. I will know for the next 3 or 4 years roughly an estimate of what our costs are going to be, an estimate of what our financial implications are going to be based upon the pressures we've got at the moment and the likely demographics that we're going to have for the next 3 to 5 years. You're correct. It makes it very difficult to do that when we get 1 year settlements, but it is something which all IJBs, and to be honest with you, all public sector organisations have to do. We just simply have to put forward our estimate of what we anticipate is going to be for the next number of years and do a revision of that once we know the information better at that point. So there is no exact science to this. It's a case of just working with the information I have and working with my team around the assumptions that we've got around it. So that's probably the best answer I can give to
that. Thanks, Craig. Let's move on to Christina Boyd.
Yeah, you're right. This is a really excellent report. I mean, I'm just sort of echoing some of the things that have already been said. It must be very difficult for staff writing these long-term reports when, as we know, we're going to be abolished in however many years. And it must be very disconcerting when you're trying to write that and thinking, am I even going to have a job a couple of years down the road when the new organisation takes place? So I think it's a real tribute to staff who've been able to get that kind of thing out of their mind and still produce such an excellent report. I mean, on the question of the funding which comes in late, I mean, it's so difficult. You may not spend it on what you want or on what you need, and there's a temptation to spend it on just something rather than have it given back. It's completely without our control, but it's so unacceptable that we get funding and do not have time to actually spend it. It's almost bordering on a con. Here is money, but we basically know it's going to be very difficult for you to spend it within that time, so we're going to be able to take some of it back. That's almost how it looks, and there's nothing that we can do about that. And it's great that staff can spend what they can, but it's just putting them under unacceptable pressure. I really feel that it is.
Thanks for that. Let's move on to Robert Moran. Robert.
Hi, thank you, Chair. No, I just want to echo the thanks to Craig and the team. I think they've done a fantastic job as usual. But I did look at the report, and it was under paragraph 39, and Kate's touched on us regarding, you know, the 5-year financial plan, which is just at the moment pie in the sky, really, because you have got the National Care Service hanging over all the time now. So it'd be very difficult for anyone, even if you did have the financial resources to plan for 5 years, considering we don't even know what's going to be here next year. So I just thought it was good that they reported that on 39, you know, that they managed to find that as an action. But as I say, under the circumstances, it'd be very, very difficult to action any of them at the moment until we know what's happening with the National Care Service.
Thanks, Robert. Yeah, I mean, just to echo what Craig has said, I mean, with any financial plan, the closer in the year, the easier it is to plan. So the further out we get towards year 5, the greater reliance Craig has on sensible assumptions based on what has happened before or what he knows might happen in the future. But But I mean, the idea would be that if we have a 5-year plan, that our year 1 plan would be pretty solid and pretty well founded. But by year 4 or 5, Craig would be crafting in assumptions on inflation, on budgeting, on settlements. And so it's a weaker prospect the further you look out, which is what I guess Robert and others are saying. It is shaky ground. And therefore, I think planners would tend to spend a lot less effort in those later years because there's no real benefit. You make assumptions and you wait and test that assumption when the financial settlement comes. But there are big variables in our expenditure. Pharmaceuticals is a big variable. The settlement we get from the 2 authorities is a variable, inflation and others. I know you know this. So the idea is that I think Craig will make best effort to produce an overarching plan that gets us beyond the 3-year point. And I think we're all recognising that in years 4 and 5, there are quite a wide range of assumptions which you'll have to make. And one of the larger ones of those is what the impact of the National Care Service will have on our structure and our planning, and I guess on our resources. So I'm not seeing any other hands. I'm happy to draw this to a conclusion. It's had a good look over already at the Audit Committee. Maybe just to summarise again for the benefit of members, as we've heard, I think a really strong report, a real endorsement of our system of internal control and governance, an unqualified opinion, appropriate arrangements in place for best value, and effective performance management arrangements. So as a chair, thank you to the board, because this does not happen in isolation. It happens because all of you play a fundamental part in the governance, scrutiny, and then support for officers. Thanks to officers for bringing us across the line here with such a strong report. Thank you to the Audit Committee for playing their part. And finally, thanks to Mark Laird, Grace Symes, and colleagues from Audit Scotland, some of whom we've gotten to know quite well over the last few years, for the work they've done with us. We're always keen to hear in the areas that we're underperforming or could be doing better. You've kindly highlighted some of those in the appendix. None of those are new to us. We know those 4 areas, and we're working fairly hard on, as best we can, on some of those. And in other areas, we're just doing best effort, because we know, for example, the integration scheme, it relies on others to play a part as well. So thank you for a positive report. Thank you for the part that everyone's played. Can I just therefore ask, there's a red dot, that might be a question. Can I just check that we're finished here? That was Robert. So I'm just really going to ask members 3 things. Are we content therefore the Chief Officer, the Chair and the Chief Financial Officer to sign the annual accounts for 21-22? I'm pretty confident you are. Thank you very much. And I'm guessing that, are we also happy for the Chief Financial Officer to sign the letter of representation, which is found at Appendix 2? Again, it would appear the board are. So with that, thank you very much to all. Let's close that item. Let us move on to item, as I say, thank you. I think Mark and Grace will probably drop out at this point. Again, just a personal thanks from me to both of you for all you've done to help us along the way with external audit in the last few years. So thank you very much indeed. I'm assuming you're not going to stay for the rest of the meeting, so thanks for that now. Let us move on to item 3, which is a short report on how the IGB can respond to the cost of living issues that we see, and some proposals from the Chief Officer which we need to consider, and if we're content therefore to agree. So I'm going to hand it straight on to the Chief Officer. Kate.
This report is in response to what we perceive is going to be some of the biggest challenges from January as we go into winter, early winter. Our data would already tell us that our requests for assistance across the board in January and February almost meet a peak, and our reliance on the use of Section 12 and Section 22 monies, particularly in children's services, is significant. The Section 12-22 monies that are sitting in children families are at its highest level that they've ever been. So that gives us a sense that it's what we're kind of modelling is much more of a reality. Now, normally under the legislation, there is an ability for social work to respond for hardship payments, restitution, but we have looked at the possibility to extend that to our other bits of our workforce through health, to ensure that we're not inadvertently bringing families or adults into a social work system that actually, when they just require a bit of assistance to try and make sure that they get through the winter. So one of the proposals that we're asking is for the IGB to consider extending the use of this funding to our health colleagues throughout the Health and Social Care Partnership. And that would meet the principles of early help without bringing people into more targeted services. We are developing warm boxes that are already going through, in some respects, our hospital to home team, but we want to extend that to our care at home service. And that would again allow, we know that older people have less likely to put on the heating, so we want to make sure that they're warm and make sure that they're getting the drinks and things like that that would make a difference. So we want to extend that and into the third sector too. And the final proposal is to look at small grants to third sector providers for them to also help to contribute to get money out for affected individuals within the community. So I'm not going to say too much more about it. It's very self-explanatory. It meets all of our strategic intentions, either for the HSEP in terms of equality and back for the council. And we believe that it will be a great asset to ensure that we're managing some of the risks that are out there. And bearing in mind our previous conversation, this is going to be utilised under our underspend. So this is a way of getting money out the system that has got some benefit, and we can see that it'll go directly to our residents or service users. So I'm not going to say any more, and I'm happy to take questions.
Kate, thanks. Before I go to questions, I know you said you didn't want to say any more. Do you want the opportunity to emphasise that Glasgow have piloted this, and so we're actually following
sorry. Yeah.
Give you 10 seconds to just cover that.
Well, as Alan says, we're not reinventing, or we're not inventing a new wheel. We're just reinventing what Glasgow have done, and Glasgow have already piloted this within children's services. Difference is that we want to extend that across the board to include all adults too.
Thanks, Kate. And with that, let's go to questions. Councillor McCluskey-Martin, the first question.
Thanks, Alan. Thanks, Kate, for this paper. It's exactly what we should be doing at this point in time, and thinking innovatively about how we might use some of the powers that we've got and some of this underspend money. I've just got a few questions. Firstly, just to make sure I understood you correctly, the programme that's been running in Glasgow has only been for children so far, so the difference with our programme is it'll be running for adults as well, is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that's right. Great, that was just to clarify that point. The other 2 points, just second on the third sector funding initiatives, how would we envisage that would operate, and is the idea that we would be providing money to third sector organisations ourselves directly, or would we do something along the lines that the council has done with the Warm Handed Friendship Scheme, where a third sector organisation administers small grants to other organisations? Do we kind of have an idea of that at this point? And then just the final question on the governance of this, notwithstanding everything I've just said about this is exactly what we should be doing. But just ask, it would be remiss not to ask how we will kind of keep track of the money that we're handing out, and how the financial governance framework that you mentioned will operate in practice. It would just be good maybe to hear a bit more from either yourself or Craig just about that. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Martin. Yeah, Kate, and for Martin's benefit, Kate and I have spoken about both of those, but I've spoken about the latter one of those in some detail, but I'll go back to Kate. Kate.
Okay, so in terms of the third sector, we have got the powers to do this already under Section 10 of the Social Work Scotland Act 1968 to get funding out to third sector that we believe that they will do that in promoting social welfare. We haven't worked out the mechanisms to do that. Last week, the Cora Foundation announced that they were doing something similar. And we want to kind of make sure that whatever we're going to do is it's got the greatest impact. Now, it may well be that we just provide various vouchers to third sector to distribute in terms of the financial governance, so that we're getting receipted to, monies. But we are still working through that. And we certainly wouldn't be putting out money unless that we felt that the financial governance was in place to be that. But you have to appreciate these are the bits that are less clear for us at this stage. There's a range of options that we can do that, but it's just for the principle for us to consider doing that. And if it isn't possible, we will come back to the IGB. In terms of the governance, and Craig's got his hand up, but the governance as we stand for Section 12 and Section 22 payments will use the same processes, and these are the governance that are actually reflected that are in the audit report. So if we were any way off kilter around that, it would be already reflected on it. It'll be much more straightforward for our own staff, but we appreciate that we've got more work to do around the third sector. Craig, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I think it was just to back up exactly what Kate's saying here, just with a wee bit more assurance around the governance side, that anybody that we will contract with in terms of being able to put out money to in order for them to distribute, we will do financial monitoring of them, as you would expect us to do, as with any organisation that we deal with. In terms of monitoring, it would be part of our general budget monitoring that we do on a monthly basis anyway. We would have budgets put in place against each of the relevant areas to see what they're spending it on. So I suppose it's just to give you a wee bit of reassurance that myself and the finance team, etc., will be covering all the angles on this one to make sure it goes through properly.
Thanks, all. Thanks for asking the question on governance. It's an area that we did explore offline. It is an extension of our current scheme, so we know we've got some oversight mechanisms in place. So it's just a case of making sure that they're robust enough to give us the confidence that we need for the assurance that we're looking for. Let us move on to Diana, please. Diana.
Hi. As an occupational therapist, I used to hold the page on a Friday in the community mental health team, and I can tell you for years now that people come in on a Friday and they've got no money for energy or for food or for paying their bills or for goodness knows what else. And your heart would sink when they did that, because filling in all the Section 12 paperwork would take you over an hour, plus persuading the senior social worker on duty to sign it off. I take it when you're saying that health staff who have operational responsibility, you mean they can actually sign off the money as well, not just fill in this long paperwork. And it does take a bit of training, knowing how many hoops you have to jump through before somebody qualifies for a Section 12. And it's still to go to the staff partnership, I notice.
Thanks, Dan. I'll go back to Kate on that. Kate, I guess the issue.
So our processes our paperwork's within our gift, Diane. But I do take your point about understanding when it would be used. So we would be putting guidance out to all staff. The other thing is it's about using people's professional judgment and common sense. If someone has got no electricity and no food and hasn't got significant clothing, there's nowhere anywhere in the Social Work Scotland Act 1968 says you can't do that. Okay, so maybe it's about the information that we need to get out to our own workforce, but certainly that certainly hits the criteria, and that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about people, but it doesn't answer the question of these are the people that we know. Our worry is the people that isn't known either. So that's why we want to look at the third sector as a partner in the delivery of this.
And just to draw your attention, if you haven't seen it, I can see Charlene has commented in the chat facility along those lines that she's looking to support that. So So there you
That's
go.
helpful, thanks. So we'll take that up, Charlene, with you.
Let me go to Simon, and then I'll go to Christina after that. Simon.
Thanks, Chair, and I'm more than happy to support this report. Just kind of adding to what other people have suggested around about the third sector thing, as well as having a record of what we spent. I'm presuming we will have some guidelines as to how we will allocate the money as well, if we haven't already developed those. And I'd suggest, I'd hope we could get a report back on this at the January IGB.
Kate.
Yeah, I think that would be sensible to come back to the IGB with how we were doing that for the third sector. Yeah, no problem.
Can I just come in there? I'm presuming that there's nothing new here because you're doing this in the social work element of our business. So the parameters and the requirements and the judgments will be broadly the same. What we're doing is extending the permissions to flag this up. And as Diana said, for some folk, new paperwork that they probably haven't seen before, but to fill in, to provide the authorization to release the funds to alleviate hardship. So we're doing something that we've always done, but we're simply doing it. We're simply allowing people who don't normally have the opportunity to do this to flag this up. If that's right, Kate, maybe just underscore that for me. So
yeah, it's extending the reach about how we actually manage without taking them into other services. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to come back to Simon's colleague of mine. Can we leave it to Kate to judge whether a report in January or March is appropriate? I'm just given it's the middle of winter and January is just a little bit ahead. It may well be that we don't have much traction with this in January. By March, we're in a much better position to say what we've done. So I'm just going to offer that back to Simon if he's content to leave to officers the concept of bringing back an update report on how this has progressed. The difference between January and March to me doesn't seem much, but I'd be happy to leave that to officers, provided we get something by March, if Simon's content with that.
Yeah, of course, Chair. Yeah, I'm sorry, I've misunderstood. I thought the funding with the third sector was new funding and was not to do with Section 12 and 22. Yeah, this was it. I got the sense that it was a new initiative because it's got new in the title, so it doesn't build on previous offers.
No, I think you're right. We've never put money out to third sector for asking them to undertake that level of, but we can legally. So that's Section 10. We can, but as far as I'm aware, we haven't done it in Inverclyde. Other local authorities have done it, but we don't seem to have done it. I've checked that out. So that is the point.
Okay, and I'm again, I'm happy to approve it, but I just think I'm assuming that you will develop guidelines as to how that money, and on the basis that guidelines will be developed, a March report would be fine.
Yeah, and it will be, and I think we'll be happy to share the guidelines, and hopefully by March we'll get a sense of the impact too.
Okay, thank you.
Simon, thanks for that. It's been really helpful to clear that up. Let's move on to Christina, and then I think Robert's waiting to comment. Christina.
Yeah, just one of my concerns was there's a new batch of people who will be giving out this money. Sometimes when you ask people to do something new, they can be a little reluctant and they might feel that they don't have the judgment or the skills necessary. So how can we be sure that all of these people will actually wish to do this? And also, I note what you were saying in terms of financial governance. My thought was, how would this actually be monitored, for instance, in real time? If there was a budget of a certain amount set aside for something, but you've got 10, 12, 15, 20 people out there who are able to authorise this, what if all of them authorise it for 2 people in the one day and it's right at the end of the budget? So these people think they're getting it, but there's actually no money in the account, but the person who's on the front line doesn't understand that. How would that work?
Well, we've already got discretion within the social work world to overspend that bit of the budget, and we have to bottom line it all the time. So we're running with a significant overspend in Section 22 because it needs space. I mean, what we would be doing is to kind of look at putting that out to the health teams with some modelling about what that looks like, and review that regularly. It's quite a bit of money, and remember, it's money that needs to go out January, February and March. So if you think about it, it's nearly £100,000 a month. So I think our biggest challenge is getting the money out, quite frankly, Christina, because that's been my experience over the years, is trying to get that money out quickly, just like our previous conversation, to the right people. So we might find that we will do our best endeavour to get that money out. We also provide guidance to staff, but again, it comes down to common sense. If someone's starving and someone's got no food, no electricity or heating, fuel, and they've got insufficient clothing, well, that professional needs to make the judgment. The only difference is they're not sending that referral into social work. They're making it themselves.
Thanks, Kate. I think because this discussion is about the third sector element, I'm sure Craig wants to contribute to that. I think also Charlene does too. So I'm going to ask Robert to just indulge me for a short time if I go to Craig and then maybe to Charlene. Craig.
Okay, no, it was just to say, John, that our plan would be to allocate a budget to each service that's relevant for this. And obviously we appreciate that it will be led by demand as we go forward in terms of it going out. We do think £100,000 at this moment in time is probably more than what we're going to need, but obviously we will be checking that on a regular basis as we start to see the payments coming through. So I suppose I just want you to be rest assured that it is something that we are looking at, and we'll be monitoring it very, very closely.
Thanks, Craig. Let's go to Charlene.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I've already offered some support to Kate and the team through the chat function. I think this is a really great initiative. CVS Inverclyde have obviously got a lot of experience in this area. We're currently administering the Warm Hands of Friendship Fund, and we've distributed about 60% of that, roughly 100k so far. We'd certainly be happy to offer support to coordinate this piece of work alongside colleagues at the HSCP, as well as support other colleagues and organisations across the third sector to distribute the funds as well as appropriate. So I'm happy to pick that up with yourself, Kate, and your team following the meeting today.
Thank you, Charlene.
Yeah, thanks, Charlene. Thank you, Kate. Robert, thanks for waiting. Robert Moran.
Thank you, Chair. Maybe just bring it back about some of the practical issues. Two of the groups I'm involved with have received a letter from the council about it, and they completed the application form, and they found it wasn't very bureaucratic. It was easy enough to fill in, and they've filled the forms in. They explain what you want the money for and how you use it, and both the groups have been very successful, and they're hoping to start it in come January. And I just think, as I said, when we spoke of this, I wanted it to be out there, everybody knew about it. Well, the fact that the council has written to various organisations and tell them about it was a great development, and it's allowed these people to get the forms, to fill them in, and they've both been successful, and they'll be starting the warm banks, what we call it, come January, where people can go and get something nice and warm and a bit of company. So on that aspect of it, I think it's great. And as I say, the forms weren't over bureaucratic. They managed to fill in no problem, and they're going to be getting the funds.
Thanks, Robert. If there are no other questions or hands, and I'll just pause to make sure there are no hands. I thought I saw a hand there. It doesn't look like it. So let me just summarise then. What I'm sensing is that there's a really positive feel around the board table here for endorsing this approach. I'm getting the sense that quite a few members are keen to see just a little bit more assurance around the governance side, but recognise that for most of this, we're doing it in other areas. We just need to make sure that we have a level of assurance that as we roll it out, we have the same level of assurance as we do for social work and how we disperse the funds. So something about governance that we're just looking for there. We've talked about maybe having a report back in, I'm guessing, about the March timeframe as to how this has gone. And we're also looking, I guess, along the way for just a little bit of visibility about those guidelines and those sorts of things, but we're confident to leave that to officers in the main. I think the other strong thing that's come through is just the hand of partnership from CVS Inverclyde, really strong, saying that we want to work with you with this to make sure that we get the right resources to the right people. And of course, they are well connected to understand who those folks are. So with that in mind, I'm just going to invite the board to pause for a second. And if they're content to approve the recommendation at 2-0, which is I think a 3 or 4 part recommendation, we've discussed all those elements. So if the board is happy to approve recommendation 2.0. Thank you very much. Kate, thanks for bringing this today. I know it was Apologies. It's gone. Thanks for bringing this today. It was a really important report and we didn't want to leave this over to any other point in, for example, January, the next meeting. So with that in mind, thank you for coming together for a special meeting. We've approved our accounts. We'll get on and sign those accounts on behalf of the board today. And we've also approved a healthy level of additional resource for the next few months to help those that are most in need, leaving to officers and others the decision as to how to make that work. And we'll just be looking for some reassurance around that in March. That completes our business for today. Thank you very much. We've come in well under the hour, which is nice. I know you've all got other things to do. Let me just say that our next meeting is towards the end of January, our next routine meeting. And although it's very premature, let me just wish you the best wishes for the season, because we won't see each other online or whatever, probably before December 25th. So thank you for all your support this year. Looking forward to seeing you again on the other side of the New Year divide when we pick up the baton and complete our work for the year. So thank you again for all your contributions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.